Okay, I'm going to teach you how to refill carafe cups for your Keurig 2.0 coffee maker. I'm not responsible for any damage you do to your coffee pot using refilled cups. Don't hack your coffee pot, hack your carafe cups. To do this, you need a used carafe cup and a new carafe cup. And I have these two right here. And we're going to start with the new cup. And you're not wasting this cup, because when you get the top off of it, which you're going to use, and you can use the top at least 100 times before you'd have to replace it. But the coffee that's in the carafe cup, we're not wasting it, because we're going to use that coffee to refill the first refillable cup that we use. So to start, you take this tab right here and you very gently start lifting up. This is for a cold brew, and you just gently pull like this, and you pull on the edges, and just very gently, because if you're not gentle, it'll tear into the filter and tear up the top. But you pull the top off like that, and you set that cup aside. Now you have the top intact, and that's our objective right here, is to have this cap, because in order to use a cup, you have to have this blue dot here, and if you cut the top out of your cup and the blue dot's messed up, you won't be able to use it. So you take this new cap that you have here, and then you take a pair of scissors, and you very gently cut around just to get the filter off. And you don't want to try to cut too close, because you can trim it up when we're done. But right now you're just trying to get the top off intact. And it's got this little cone thing inside it that the water goes through when it's making the coffee. And what you do is you just very gently pull that off. And now you've got your cone here, and it's got little holes in it that the water goes through. And you take your cap and you kind of ruffle the edges a little bit like that to get the excess up where you can see it. And then you take your scissors and just trim that off a little bit, because you want the top to fit snugly on your cap of the carafe cup that you're going to reuse. Okay, so now this right here is what's going to help you make and use your cups, your reusable cups. So now you have this one here. We're going to set it aside because we want to use that coffee. We don't want to waste it. Okay, now we're going to take a cup that we've already used, and this is actually the cup that we're going to reuse. So what you do is you take your scissors, and you don't want to cut really close to this the black edge here, because if you do, it's going to cut into the filter. So you go out a little bit of ways from it, stick your scissors or a knife, whatever you want to use, and you gently cut around here, and you make sure you don't get close to the filter. And you really have to be careful at this spot right here, because this is the hole where the brewed coffee comes out of, and if you cut into that, it will make coffee grounds go into your pot. So you very gently cut across there. All the way around. Okay, now pull that cone out. I like to trim mine up because it makes it easier to fit them in the middle and see exactly where it's supposed to go. I just trim the excess foil off around the plastic. I'm going to set that aside. Then we're going to take this used filter here, and we're going to get the coffee out of it. And you don't want to stick anything down in there to pull that coffee out, or you'll make a hole in the filter, because the filter's wet and it would be real easy to poke a hole in it. So what you do is you take a flat surface somewhere, and you turn the filter upside down and tap it on there, but you don't want to get this part of the filter on the coffee grounds, because it'll make them go up in there. So I'm not going to bang this whole thing out because it's very loud, but I'm going to show you a little bit, and then I'm going to pause, and then I'll tell you how I did the rest of it. So you take it and you turn it upside down on a plate or something on a flat surface and move around. Actually, this is not too loud. I'll go ahead and finish. But you don't want to get that hole down in there, because it'll force the grounds up in there. Then you can take, this is a fan brush that I use, and you can just get as much as you can of the coffee out of there. You don't want to take this and rinse it in your sink like this, because over time you'll get a lot of those coffee grounds down in your sink, and it'll clog up your sink. Unless you have a garbage disposal, and I don't know, it might clog up a garbage disposal. But anyway, you get as much of the coffee grounds as you can out. And it's even better if you just take it like this and let it sit for about an hour or two until it dries out a little bit, and then take the brush and brush it out, the dry stuff out. It'll come out a whole lot easier. But anyway, when you get to the point where you've got all the coffee grounds out that you can get out, you take it over to the sink, and you run cold water, and you put your thumb over this hole here, because if you don't, grounds will wash into there and you'll get grounds in your next pot of coffee. So what you do is you put your thumb over that hole right there, run the water in, and just swish it around. You can pull the filter around a little bit if you need to. Just be gentle with it so you don't tear a hole in it, and it'll come out completely clean. And after you do that, this is what it's going to look like. And then you let that dry. And I have several cups going. That way I always have cups drying, so that each day I have a dry cup that's ready to go. And now I'm going to pause and clean this mess up here, and then I'll show you how I refill the cups. Okay, I'm going to push this up out of the way here so I have room to show you how I make the caps for my reusable carafe cups. So I took this cup right here that I had pulled the top off to use on each one of the reusable cups, and I took a piece of note card and I used this to trace around it to make a pattern, and I traced about 1/4 of an inch out bigger than what the top of the cup is, because when you cut your foil it needs to be big enough to fold around the top of the cup to seal it. And what I did was I took foil and I doubled the foil, because it's not really heavy enough foil to seal it good. So if you use 2 pieces, it works great. And anyway, I took the foil and I put my pattern on there, and I just trace around the pattern, and I have this piece right here. And then I just cut around like so. This right here when I'm done. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just close enough to where it fits around there. And now what I'm going to do is show you how to assemble the cup. And what I do is I take the cup that is washed, that I cut the top off of, and here is the coffee from the new carafe cup that we're not going to waste. We're going to reuse it. And this will also show you how much coffee that you're able to put in one of these cups to make it work right. So just gently pour that over in there. And when you put your cup together, you need to make sure that there's no coffee grounds around the edges. Push anything back in there and be careful not to get coffee down in that hole there, or it'll end up in your carafe when you make your coffee. So then you take your cup and you kind of tap it down a little bit. This is actually a little bit more than what I usually put in mine. But if you want a really strong pot of coffee, then you can use that much, and don't overfill it, because if you overfill it, it will make your coffee pot leak. So the way to prevent that from happening is less instead of more. And if you want a big pot of really strong coffee, then make two of these cups and use the lower setting and get you a strong pot of coffee. Don't try to make it all in one cup just because you want a really strong pot, because you don't want to tear up your coffee maker. This is the cone that came out of the used cup. And what you do is you take this and you very carefully put it right in the middle of that carafe cup. Then you take this foil and you make sure that you get it right in the middle all around, and then you start folding your edges up. Do it on the sides first to make sure you get it in the right spot. You can move it forward or backward, however you need, and then you just fold the foil all the way around the cup. And you go around pinching the edges until you get a really nice snug fit. And if you can see the edges around there, you know it's a nice snug fit. Okay, so I moved my coffee pot over here so I can let you watch me brew a carafe full of coffee with the cup that I just showed you how to reuse. So I have the coffee pot all warmed up and ready to go. Here's the new cup that we just made, and here is the new cap that's never been used. You have to have this because that dot right there is what tells the coffee pot that to work, and if that dot's not there, it won't work. So you just put your cap on top like that. You slide your cup down in there the way you normally would, and this doesn't have to be perfectly in the right spot, but you want to be able to use this cap 100 times if you want to. So if you're careful with it and you always line up the holes, once you use this, it's going to have a hole in it, and if you line your holes up with the holes that are in the cup, it won't tear it up, and you can use it over and over and over again. So then what we do is just close the lid and recognize it as a regular carafe cup. And I want to make a full pot, so I put the settings on where I want it, and now it's brewing. It's going to take a few minutes, but you'll start to see the coffee come around here. There it goes. Okay, it's almost done. I took a little pause in there because it takes quite a long time to make a carafe of coffee, and while we're waiting for this to finish up, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what kind of coffees I use. When the pot's finished, I'll actually get some different brands of coffee out to show you. But if you like Folgers coffee, just use Folgers coffee. But I like gourmet coffees. My favorite coffee to use is Millstone, hazelnut, and vanilla. Those are my favorite flavors of coffee. But if you want a really, really strong coffee, you can stick with whatever you like. But if you reuse your cups like this, you can save a lot of money. Okay, the pot's finishing up. Okay, it's ready. And now you can see. You have to be careful pulling this out right after you make a pot because it's hot. But now you can pull that cup out and reuse it. And you can even reuse the foil that you used in this cup right here. Okay, this is a cup that I've already used before. I don't want to take the hot one out of the machine there because it's too hot to work with. So anyway, this is what it looks like after you've reused your cup. You just pull this off, and you can rinse this, and you can wash this with soap and water if you want to. And you take something sharp that you can get under the edge with, and just gently lift the foil. And I reuse the foil on these caps at least 10 times before I replace them. And if you're gentle when you remove them and put them back on, you won't tear the foil up. And you can reuse it over and over again. But the worst thing that's going to happen is you'll have to cut you some more foil for the tops. But you just get it until it's nice and loose. And you pull it off, and when you put it back on, it's almost perfect. And then you come over here and you take this little cone thing out of here. I don't know what you'd call this. I just call it a cone. And you can wash this with soap and water if you want to. Just make sure that you shake all of the water out of it and run water through it. What I do is I take the cone and I turn the water on, and I let the water run down through that hole, and it'll squirt out through the holes in here and clean everything out. And if you do get a little bit of coffee grounds in there, don't worry about it. As long as the holes are not all plugged, it'll be fine. If your holes do get plugged, let it dry out and just blow through that hole right there, and it'll get the coffee out of there. Anyway, you just do like I showed you before, where you take the cup, keep doing that until you get all the coffee out that you can, and then you wash it just like you did before. And then when you're when you have a dry cup, then you just take the foil from that you've already used before and put it back on after you refill it and use it again. And you can do this many times, and it saves a lot of money. I pay about $12 for 8 of these cups, and I don't really want to spend that kind of money on coffee. I do like using my Keurig, but it's a little bit more expensive than what I care for. So I found my own coffees that I really like, as well as the brands that you can get from Keurig. The Seattle's Best Hazelnut is a really good gourmet flavored coffee, but my favorite is Millstone, and I like the French vanilla and hazelnut cream. Those are both really good flavors, and they taste really good made in the reusable carafe cup. And I also like this Harmony Bay hazelnut cream. If I can't get the Millstone hazelnut, this is the second best flavor for me, and this is a very inexpensive coffee. It cost about $6 for this can, whereas the Millstone cost anywhere from $9 to $10 for one of these 12-ounce bags. So I do buy a lot of this just because it's a good flavor. But keep using your reusable cups, and but do replace the caps after you've used them about 10 times, because if you don't replace the caps, they could start to leak, and you don't want your machine to leak all over your counter or something when you make a pot of coffee. And one of the things I do is I put my coffee maker in a tray like this, so that if it did leak, then it's going to be caught with this. And if you do have any leak at all, you need to replace the cap on your cup, and you need to check the filter to make sure it doesn't have any holes in it.